So now we're going to start to go through some of the senses, starting with smell and taste. So before we go into the senses, we need to define some of the receptors that are involved in sensory sensations. So exteroceptors are receptors that are on the surface of the body. They're predominantly going to sense temperature, touch, and pain on the surface of the body. Visceroceptors are on the inside of the body. All of the internal organs contain visceroceptors. Proprioceptors are inside of the joints and muscles, and those are going to tell the brain information about body position and movement. When we talked about that stretch reflex inside of the, so if we were talking about the patellar reflex, and I talked about tapping on that patellar ligament, pulls on the muscle and stretches the muscle, proprioceptors are the receptors that sense that the muscle has been stretched, and that sends the signal to the brain to contract the muscle, and that kicks out your leg during the patellar reflex. Mechanoreceptors sense when they are physically compressed. So if somebody touches your arm, they're pushing in on those mechanoreceptors and they're compressed, so that senses that you're being touched. Additionally, hearing and balance operate based on mechanoreceptors. Chemoreceptors sense chemicals. So your sense of taste and smell are dependent on chemoreceptors. Thermoreceptors sense temperature up to a certain point and down to a certain point. So there's a certain range of temperatures that thermoreceptors can sense. Outside of that, your body just interprets that as pain. So nociceptors are pain receptors. Photoreceptors are light receptors. Osmoreceptors sense the osmolarity of the blood, and they play a major role in regulating blood pressure and all that type of stuff. And adaptation. Adaptation is a decrease in the sensation of a particular stimulus after the stimulus has been constant. So a decrease in your response to a constant stimulus. So there's some background noise probably in the room around you, and that background noise is something that you pay attention to initially, but eventually, after constant stimulation, you stop hearing it. So whether you're in the classroom and it's the sound of the projector, or if you're outside on a windy day and it's the sound of the wind blowing the leaves in the trees, eventually that constant stimulus is going to go away and you're going to sense that less. So that's what adaptation is. It's kind of adapting to a constant stimulus. So now we're going to go through the various pathways, and I have put these pathways together to give you guys like all of the information that you need on these slides. So definitely take good notes on these pathways. You do need to know all of the individual components of them for the exam, and I may ask you questions like the olfactory neuron is part of which sensory pathway, or olfactory cilia is responsible for which, or is part of which sensory pathway. So you should definitely know all of these different parts. So how do we smell stuff? Well, stuff comes up into our nose, and that air that we're bringing into our nose gets warmed by these nasal concha, and as it's passing through here, the mucus in here is going to trap the chemicals from the air, and they're going to dissolve in that mucus. And the chemicals and the mucus are going to come in contact with these olfactory cilia. Anytime you see olfactory or olfaction, that's referring to the sense of smell. And the olfactory cilia are just extensions of the olfactory neurons, kind of like dendrites. The olfactory neurons are going to go through these olfactory foramina of the ethmoid bone. You should have remembered that from when we went through the skeletal system. And they're going to combine in this olfactory bulb. When we do the brain dissection, we're going to look at the underside of the brain, and whether it's the virtual dissection or the in-person dissection, we're going to be seeing the olfactory bulb on the bottom of the brain. From the olfactory bulb, olfactory tracks kind of lead back to the brain. So this shows you the pictures of those first three. And here's that olfactory bulb, and you can see all of those neural connections in the olfactory bulb. The olfactory tract goes to the olfactory cortex of the brain. From there, the smell can be sent to the hypothalamus or limbic system in order to remember the scent or recall things about the scent. So smells can have an emotional effect on us as well. So if you have dated someone that always wore a certain type of cologne or perfume, you may smell that smell and be reminded of them. Or if one of your parents, usually parents with their children, the children kind of get to recognize the scent or the perfume or even just the soaps of their parents, and they react with those smells. For me, when I smell almond extract, I'm immediately reminded of my grandma because she used to use that to bake her cheesecakes. So smell has an emotional connection as well, and we want to make sure that we can maintain that emotional connection to particular smells. Anosmia is a lack of the sense of the smell. Lack of the sense of smell. It can be temporary. Like if you have a cold, you have excess mucus that's going to super dilute out the chemicals that are coming in, so you tend to smell things a little bit less. Or it can be permanent if there's damage to the neural pathway. So, for example, if a patient comes in and they have snorted drugs like cocaine and that type of stuff, that can permanently damage those neural pathways and they won't be able to smell anything anymore. The sense of smell is associated with the sense of taste. They kind of go hand in hand. So if you have a decreased sense of smell, it's been associated with severe depression. So moving on to the sense of taste. There are 4 different types of taste buds. The ones that you look at on the surface of your tongue that you most commonly think of when you think of a taste bud are called the fungiform ones. So those are the large mushroom-shaped anterior 2/3 of the tongue taste buds. If you stick your tongue out as far as you possibly can and kind of angle it to the side, you may be able to see these 2 taste buds. So like these on the ends here. I had a student of mine whose were like really swollen and they were protruding into her mouth, and she said she went to the doctor about it, and the doctor was alarmed at how large they are and was wondering how she can even swallow with those. But she showed the entire class her circumvallate taste buds, so that was kind of interesting. It's a different component of class. So circumvallate, huge dome-shaped, form 1 row near the back of the tongue. Foliate are leaf-like on the lateral edges of the tongue, and then filiform, they're little thread-like taste buds that are going to be scattered among the fungiform ones. Each of the taste buds is capable of sensing each of the 5 major taste sensations: salty, bitter, sour, sweet, and umami. And umami is protein flavored. So if you've ever craved protein like eggs or meat or cheese or anything like that, if you've ever been pregnant and you're craving those types of protein type things, you're craving that taste of umami. Sweet is when a sugar binds, sour is when an acid binds, bitter is when a base binds, and salty is when an ionic compound binds, like a metal-non-metal combination. So if you look at a taste bud contains different sensory receptors or different gustatory hairs that can trap all of those different types of chemicals. So when a sugar binds to the gustatory hair here, that's going to trigger the sensation of something sweet to the brain. Now they say that certain regions of the tongue have different taste sensations, but that's not necessarily true. Every taste bud on your tongue can sense all of these different tastes. It's just some taste buds have more gustatory hairs specific for one taste over the other. So there are regions that you tend to taste certain tastes a little bit more than others, but every taste bud has all of these different types of gustatory hairs. So the gustatory hair, which is attached to the gustatory neuron, traps the chemicals. Once a chemical binds to a chemoreceptor on the gustatory hair, action potential is sent down the neuron. From the taste buds, also called papillae, signal is gathered by one of the cranial nerves, so we just learned about the different cranial nerves, and sent to the brainstem and relayed through the thalamus to the insula for the interpretation of taste. If the taste must be remembered, it will further be relayed to the thalamus or limbic system. Homeostatic imbalances, so hypogeusia is a decreased ability to taste. Sometimes it's due to the lack of smell or damage to the taste buds. And agusia is a complete absence of the sense of taste. So usually some part of the neural pathway is damaged.